A health challenge can force you to rethink everything: your priorities, your relationships, even your career. Today's guest, Nick Loise, has faced that very reality, and it reshaped not only his personal life, but his approach to business. As a seasoned sales executive and entrepreneur who worked with the legendary marketing guru Dan Kennedy, Nick's passion for helping others succeed took on new meaning. In this episode, Nick shares how he views sales and marketing and how that's changed over the years, and emphasizes the importance of a relentless focus on customer value. We'll explore how businesses can build systems that generate lasting results, the crucial role of mentorship, and why prioritizing relationships while never easing up on sales are the key to long-term success. If you're ready to hear a story about resilience, growth, and the lessons that go beyond business, stick around. This episode is about more than sales. It's about building a legacy.
Hello, and welcome to Hero Up, the podcast that inspires and challenges you to step up and become heroic in all areas of your life. I'm your host, Tony Stark Polici, and it's my goal to give you practical, actionable advice and insights into copywriting, mindset, lifestyle, and impact. On this show, we'll explore how to create compelling and persuasive marketing messages, and I'll give you clever tips to make you stand out as a hero. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a freelancer, a coach, or a creative, this podcast is for you. So, let's dive in. All right, everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Hero Up podcast. You just heard the amazing introduction of my friend Nick Loise here, and Nick is an amazing guy. Nick, thank you so much for being here and agreeing to be on the show today.
Well, Tony, first off, thank you for having me, and thank you for this podcast. All the stuff you do and the topics that you go into is phenomenal, right? Because I don't think we talk about a lot of that enough. And I knew I was going to be on this podcast. I've been working hard to get my beard because you've got a phenomenal one, right? So I'm almost there. I got a diet, right? So it looks as good as yours. But, anytime you get two guys with two beards, talking about marketing and life and sales and business, it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, well, you know what? The beard looks great, and I feel really bad for anyone that is just listening to this and can't actually see you, because one of the blessings of continuing to have a few birthdays, we start to get distinguished, right?
Yeah. Well, as I say, I got a face for radio, and now it's a face for podcasts. So they're not missing anything if they're just listening.
Yeah, and I made a choice to put contacts in this morning because sometimes when I'm doing the podcast, the glare gets pretty bad in my glasses. But if I would not have done that, we would have been almost identical.
Well, you're better looking. So I would look like your dad. You're much younger looking and better looking. So, yeah.
Funny. Well, again, I appreciate you being here. So let me just start. So first of all, who are you and what do you do?
Right.
Let's start there.
So, Nick Loise, I like to say I'm first a husband and a father, right? And then third, I'm a salesperson and a business executive. I've owned my own firm now. It's my third entrepreneurial step, right? But prior to that, people may know me as VP of sales and president of a company that was called GKIC, right? And so Sales Performance Team, which is the company I currently have, when we founded in 2019, was a offshoot of that, right? Because people could understand marketing, small businesses can understand how funnels, copywriting, lead generation, all that. But what we found is that they struggled with hiring salespeople or managing salespeople or retaining salespeople. So we created a firm to help them with that. We help them in a number of different ways, which I'm sure we'll get into. But that's what I am. I kind of grew up as a salesperson, so I love it. It was my chosen profession. And I've been doing it in a lot of different industries. So obviously I've got entrepreneurial ADD because I can't stick to one thing. And I just love the craft of selling, and I love the craft of copywriting. That's what I was excited about, of just, because I think really good copywriters are just phenomenal salespeople in print, and that's your expertise. So I'm excited to learn as much as I give.
Well, Nick, I love that. And I love the fact that the priorities that you gave there in identifying, who you are in this world as a husband and a father.
Yeah.
And, those have, they didn't start out to be my priorities when I got into marketing, but then again, I wasn't married when I first started back in 1991, but they shifted relatively quickly, and they became the most important things to me. So I really honor you for that. And speaking of marketing, so some people will know you, but the younger folks, they will not know. But you worked with Dan Kennedy. So Dan
Yeah.
Kennedy was a mentor of mine. I think we discovered him about the same time, somewhere in 19. I know I went to a Peter Lowe seminar with Joe. We went to a bunch of those. I think he took me to one for the first time to hear Dan speak. But anyway, Dan Kennedy, brilliant marketer, copywriter. His business has gone through a number of iterations with lots of different initials, GKIC, JPDK, like all these different things. So you worked with Dan, one of the great marketers, for years, right? What were the most valuable lessons that you learned during that time that you still apply today?
Sure. I'm going to answer that, but let's say that I think you and I were probably, if you were at a Peter Lowe, I first saw him in 1993 in the Phoenix Sun Arena in Arizona. I was running the West Coast sales team for the company I was working with. I took all of the sales guys to this event. And, sales guys, because Zig Ziglar was speaking, right? That was the reason why we were there. And Brian Tracy, right? And I think it was George Bush, right? Who knows, right? So who knows who else was on there? And at the end, right, it's clearing out. And, so I promised him I'd buy him around, right? So we're going to go to, downtown Phoenix, right? And have a couple of adult beverages. And there's a guy with a mustache, a big guy with a mustache running around putting like pink flyers out. And I'm like, who is this? So I go and look, and it's Dan Kennedy, right? And he's talking about marketing. He's like about magnetic marketing. And so I said, we're staying, or at least I'm staying because I'm interested, right? Anybody working this hard deserves an audience, right? He's like, hey, don't leave. If you leave, you're just going to sit in the parking lot. He does a spiel if you know magnetic marketing. And so that was my, I bought magnetic marketing. I don't have it close, or because all of a sudden you'd see me leave the screen, but I would hold up the original one, right? It's dog-eared. It's got, well, I've spilled coffee on it for sure, and so, but it's been it's kind of where I'm at. So to answer your question, what have I learned? The importance of magnetic marketing, right? The importance of picking the right audience, the importance of having the right message to the right audience, right? So market, message, and then the right media, whatever that media is. The media has changed over the course of time. Back in our day, we could use faxes. Young guys listening to this have no idea what that was, right? Or pass out flyers or those type of things. And so the most important thing is I don't think entrepreneurs spend enough time on who's the right audience, who really has money, who really wants to buy my product and services, and what's their pain, what's their problem, right? So problem, agitate, solve. How can I get that to them? Most important thing, and I don't think we do enough of that. Now it's, hey, I got a Ferrari that I rented for the day and I'm cool, so buy my stuff, right? In the info marketing world. That's the first thing. The second thing that I still use to this day, and ironically, I was just going over the list before you and I got on this call because I was going over it with Jack Turk, who you and I probably both know, a copywriter, is don't just, as a business person, you've got 80 things to do to grow your business. You can't just do one and then wait till that's done to do the second one and wait till that's done and wait till the third one. You got to do them all sequentially, right? If you want big results, you got to work hard. Third thing that I learned, and he is the master at this, is always be selling. And, he's a marketer and he's a copywriter, but he's really a salesperson, always excellent at that. And I remember there was an interview that Lee Miltier, who I'm referencing, was doing. And they're like, okay, I got a question from the audience. And he's like, well, when has a small business owner, can I ever stop selling and marketing? Never. You never can, but we all want to, right? We all take the foot off the brakes. We all want it to be easy. We all want this, and you can't. And I think those are the top three things. And if I'll throw a bonus one in, right? Because, you always have to have bonuses and fast action bonuses and all that stuff being with Dan. The fourth one is really work on being somebody, right? Somebody to something, right? So authority, celebrity, expert, positioning is the most important thing. Using the marketing to do the pre-selling so the selling is easy. Those that do it, those that master it, the riches are theirs, right? And it doesn't matter what they're selling to who they're selling. If you could figure out that, you're going to figure out that. Listen, I've got a list of 1,000 more. We could go deep or do another call on this. Certainly a mentor of mine, privilege, honor of the world to work with him. Every day wasn't sunshine and roses. You may think it is because he's such a, kind, gentle guy, but, I learned so much from him, and everybody listening, go buy his stuff. He'll love that, right? Go get all of his stuff and just study him, because I think he's truly, one of the preeminent thinkers for marketing, for positioning, for sales, for business, in our lifetime.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would make this interesting comparison that some people might not agree with, but when I think about what Elon Musk has done for technology and innovation and risk taking, I think Dan Kennedy has the same kind of genius when it comes to sales and marketing. Just the ability to really think at a whole different level and see things. And you just gave a crash course in the fundamentals of how to run successful marketing and sales campaigns in those 4 points that you gave, Nick. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about both those guys, really not classically trained, right? Just great, phenomenal, voracious readers, voracious inputters of stuff, and then having the tenacity and the internal fortitude, right? Intestinal fortitude to think differently and talk about what you think and act differently. So I think there's a lesson in there for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So how has your approach to marketing and sales evolved, like in the digital landscape? Because we both cut our teeth when things were different. We were using a lot of direct mail. We're using space advertising, infomercials, those kinds of things that still exist. But now we've got everybody's digital, right? So how have things evolved for you and your business and the way that you work with your clients?
Well, I don't think you're ever going to get away from the digital acquisition of a customer. I think it's very inexpensive, right? It's expensive to do direct mail cold. I think you want to get them, acquire them digitally, and then take them offline as fast as possible. We do a lot of work, and quite frankly, with our clients with a lot of outbound phones too, right? So we do a lot of that. So inbound lead coming in, get them to a setter, get them to a phone person, then get them to a salesperson or account executive or strategist, do a discovery call, move them through to close. Or if I take over clients that never had an outbound, we do a lot of that. I think that people, especially traditional businesses and even, info marketing businesses, coach consultants, they're going out and figuring out how to acquire the lead. But now the one thing that you and I both know is all leads aren't equal, right? And so one of the things that we look at is what's the source? What's the best source, right? So LinkedIn for some may be a better source. It's just more expensive. And sometimes business owners will say, well, it's too expensive a lead. Yes, it is, but it closes 70% of the time, where a Facebook or Instagram lead closes 20% of the time, right? So we want to look at all the different sources, look at obviously your cost per lead, cost per sale, return on advertising spend, but you're not going to get away from digital's here, right? And I think digital's here. Now, I grew up and I had a business where we were sending 80,000 postcards, 90,000 postcards, 100,000 postcards, every month. That's a check to write, i.e. to the U.S. Postal Services. So I have a breath of fresh air when I could get away with a $20,000 Facebook spend, right? So, it's just the economics. You're not upside down and you're not exposed. And I think the speed that you could respond to an ad that's not working, right, or a funnel that's not working on digital is much faster than the old days. In the old days with the print advertising, if the phone didn't ring, you're like, okay, something was amiss, but I'm out of pocket, whatever that was, 10,000, 20,000 for the exposure. You print the yellow page ad, something was amiss, right? That's a problem. Now on digital, I could fix that immediately. So there's the speed access to the test, which I think is great. I think it's inexpensive to test, right? Obviously you do a soft, you do a run of 1,000 or 2,000 on a direct mail campaign, see what your response rates are. But, listen, everybody went remote. How do we get stuff to people, right? On direct mail, right? Nobody was in the office. So there was one person that came in once a month and threw everything out. Well, that was expensive to ship all that stuff to them. So you got to always be testing, right? You got to always be testing.
That's a great comparison there. Is the one advantage that we did not have when we started was that speed, and money loves speed, right? That's one thing that we've learned. And the ability to be able to change something and really iterate as quickly as possible, or as soon as you see something not working, is a tremendous advantage. Let me ask you this. I remember and this is a little bit of a step back, but I remember that you used to have this policy that once you talked with somebody, a sales lead, a qualified lead, that you wanted to make sure that you got something physical into their hands as quickly as possible.
100%.
Is that is that
Yep.
still something that
Yeah, I mean, look at you guys do it, right? I got your book, shipped to me when Ron and I talk, right? So, I mean, you got to get something to them as fast as possible. Behind me, I got my book, right? It's just a quick book. It's from, the 90-minute book that Joe talks about and his partner in crime, his name escapes me, from I Love Marketing, talk about, right? So get a book
Dean,
out. Yeah. Get a
Dean,
book out. Get a book as fast as you can. Get a newsletter. I don't care. Create a magazine that's, all about you. Get it to them. And now that becomes your business card. That becomes your positioning statement. Some call it a shock and awe package, right? Doing that is really sets you apart. And if you've got margin in your business, if you've got, and if you don't, find a new business, right? But get some margin in your business. You could send that to them because no one else is doing that. And right now the world is competitive, right? No one's just looking at one thing. They're getting multiple bids. For some of my clients, I see proposals languishing, right? So we're trying different things. Maybe I need to put a shock and awe box in. So I'm going to let you know if I got to do that just to make things fast, because listen, clients don't want to spend the money, right? So you and I are now both in the client work. And they're like,
right.
well, can I just send the shock and awe box electronically? Yeah, but everybody's got 300,000 emails, right? And now my SMS text, I'm getting 100 junk texts because we're in the middle of a voting season, right? But everything is full except for my mailbox. Right. So why not just go to the mailbox and make it that way? And, if you look at the folks that have really phenomenal businesses, either their service business or they have a product business, whatever it is, they get something to somebody. And so I'm a firm believer of that. As soon as that phone hangs up, and there's great people that do that. You could partner with them and they'll get it out for you. So you as the business owner don't have to. In the old days, when I was first starting my marketing and direct mail shop, the goal was, it had to go out. I was taking them to the post office every day, right? And then shipping them out. And that's how I knew how many phone calls I had to make in 2 days, right? Because you would follow up on those things. So absolutely.
Wow, that's great. Let's talk about your new company for just a minute. As the
Sure.
founder of Sales Performance Team, talking about some of the things that you've just covered, like how does that tie in? What are the most common sales challenges that you see small to mid-sized businesses facing today?
Same as there always are, right?
Yeah.
Talent. How do I get talent? How do I up-level talent? How do I, get salespeople that want to do the work, that want to follow up? We've created an industry of maybe a generation of really lazy salespeople because they've grown up with SDRs, right? Which is sales development reps, or setters, right? People that are filling up their calendar. And so we have a generation that doesn't know how to fill their calendar. I grew up not knowing anybody, or just picking up the phone and making dials, right? Or just, following up on emails or following up on direct mail letters that I had sent out, right? So just doing the hard work. So teaching people the blocking and tackling is the most important thing. Hiring the right people, the right person that is the right fit for what you're selling and who you're selling to is the second thing. And third thing is that most founders led organizations, business owners have not created a predictable sales process that somebody could follow, because they're the best at selling their business. I'm not taking anything away from them, but they intuitively know what to do, right? So the salesperson that watches them or learns from them or kind of, listens to their calls doesn't realize why I'm saying something at 17 minutes in, so I don't get an objection at 34 minutes in, and I get the close at 45 minutes, right? So they don't know that. And the business owner has just rotely been doing it, right? It's like swinging a golf club. I use the analogy. Somebody went to Jack Nicklaus and said, Jack, how do you hit a 1-iron? He goes, you take it out of your bag and you swing it, right? Because he just knew how to do it, but he couldn't teach somebody how to do that. So we break the mechanics down and teach people how to swing the 1-iron, i.e. do a sales call.
Yeah, that's really important. I know when I hired my first VA, I had a heck of a time trying to teach them what I wanted them to do.
Right.
And I know somebody asked me to describe your process. And I've been doing this so long it's like, God, what is my process? And actually taking that and creating a SOP,
Right.
that you can then give to somebody else so that they can duplicate is super powerful. But I love the fact that the same challenges still exist. You did an awful lot of work. I mean, I think this is probably part of what your company is now, is in the area where most companies fall down, is they're having terrible salespeople or not
Right.
building good sales teams, right? And is it because of what you just said that we've fostered like generations of lazy salespeople and people really don't know how to sell? They don't know how to connect with others?
I think it's yes, yes, and yes, right? So we have put them in. There's a proliferation of really cheap leads. It doesn't mean that leads are going to buy, right? There's a lot of cheap leads that are gumming up sales processes, if you will, because it's easy to acquire them. In some industries, it's not. Some industries is purely outbound, where they're just going out and hunting, right? And I think that there are a lot of people in my space, Tony, as I'm sure you see in your space, in the copywriting space, in the marketing strategy space, that haven't kept up with the times. So they're just talking about stuff that worked when you and I saw Dan Kennedy in 1993, right? The world is different. The sales process is different. The buyers are different. There's different demographics that we're selling to. So you just have to kind of know that and deal with it and just be on top of it. So I think it's yes, yes, and yes. I also, listen, I said there's a lot of really bad sellers out there. There's a lot of really, really good sellers out there too, right? There's a lot of great salespeople out there. And I'm really impressed with some of the young people coming out of college now that have been on sales track, right? But they're going into high level. They're going to the IBMs of the world. They're going to sell medical supplies and devices and that. They're not a lot of times going to smaller businesses. So the small business person, because the economics don't work for them, can't buy that A-level salesperson. So what he needs to do is what we just talked about, create systems and processes and predictable flow so that they could take a C-level salesperson, train them up with the right scripts, with the right processes, with the right discovery questions, whatever their process is, so that they are performing at a B level. Right? Because that's what you have to do. The economics don't allow you to hire somebody that wants to go sell for Salesforce and knows that they're going to be making $250,000, right? It's just a different level of caliber. So you got to get the right level of caliber that you could afford, the economics of it, and then create a system to train them up. I mean, we're looking at some things, like we use VAs in the Philippines. They're phenomenal for outbound, but you have to be really crystal clear on your scripts and your rebuttals and everything because English isn't their first language. We're also looking at some alternatives in Latin America, right? And we can get away with that if you're selling into big cities because there's a slight tinge of an accent. But they're a third of what a salesperson would cost you in the United States.
When it comes to creating these processes, the thing that comes to mind for me is this principle of leadership, right? We have to be leaders in our business. So you've shared the stage with a lot of industry leaders. What do you think sets a truly exceptional marketer and business leader apart from those that aren't in today's competitive environment?
It's a great question. I think there is an X factor, right? One is they're really curious people, right? So we talked about Elon and Dan. They're both really curious people. They are constantly thinking about how can I just see what I just saw and apply it to where I want to go. So that's the first thing, right? They're curious and they're constantly pushing forward. Two is that they're maniacal, not in a bad way, right? So that's a verb that I don't want to, they're not miracle, right? They're maniacal about the customer experience, moving the customer experience and up leveling that because that becomes their value proposition to the marketplace, right? So the greatest entrepreneurs, the greatest small business people, the greatest people that I've ever worked with were focused on the end user, i.e. the customer, the patient, whoever you're serving, and what is that experience? How do we make that better? And how can I put more margin in the business so I can up-level that experience, right? Because if they're buying it for $1, but they want a $10 experience, my economics are off, right? We were just talking a little bit about that in some businesses. So they're always thinking about that. And the third thing is they just know the numbers. right? They never take their eye off the numbers. And where I've lost it, where I've missed it, where I haven't done some great in my own companies is kind of taking your eyes off the numbers a little bit, right? So you kind of have to manage by scorecard, KPI, manage by process, all the time so that at a glance where the money is, where it's going out, what the customer satisfaction is, all of that stuff that drives your business.
Yeah, those are crucial points. And I think the thing that I came to mind for me was be obsessed with the client or customer experience.
Yeah.
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 So, Nick, for people that maybe just their eyes roll back in their heads when they think about looking at their numbers or their P&Ls, right?
Yeah.
So what would you suggest to somebody who just is like that whole concept, they want to avoid it because it just feels so painful? What is, do you have any suggestions for somebody that just wants to go run away from that kind of stuff?
Yeah, they can't. I mean, you can't that, or make sure your spouse is looking at it, right? Somebody needs to be the adult in the room, and it's your business. I think we talked about that. It's your business. You're the business leader, and you're doing a disservice because if you've got 15 people on your payroll, you got 15 lives that you're now responsible for. Right. And you're taking your eye off of it is putting not only you in jeopardy, your company, probably your number one source of retirement, right? If you're going to have an exit, but also the livelihoods of all your employees. So you got to do it.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the things I discovered was I need to have a good person doing my bookkeeping. I need to have a good CPA, not somebody that just as a number cruncher, but somebody that can actually explain what some of these things mean to me, right?
Yeah.
And getting in and really learning to understand the numbers is so crucial. And it was a mistake that I made, early in my career, not really paying attention to that stuff.
I think we all have, right? We're all guilty of it at one point, right? If business is going bad, it's easy to kind of put your head in the sand and hope that it will go over. Hope isn't a strategy. I don't know who said it, but I agree with that. And so you just kind of have to, right? And listen, I'm pointing the finger and I got 5 going back at me, right? So I'm not judging. I'm just saying is learn from my experience or learn from my observations or learn from, working with others that you have to do this.
Right. Those are priorities. Absolutely. Speaking of priorities.
Yeah.
How have yours changed from when you first started your entrepreneurial journey to where you're at now?
So I think they changed how I introduced myself, right? I'm a husband and a father. And I think when I was younger, I've been married, blessed to be married to the same woman. We're celebrating 30 years together, right? My children are 26 and 23. And I don't know if I was as good as I am today as making that step 1 and step 2, right, on the ladder. And I'd be lying to say I was, right? And so there was times where also the stress from the office would come home, right? And that's not fair to the people around me. The stress from losing sales or winning sales or trying to grow a business or managing the cash flow, as we talked about, that would seep into the household. And now I made it a priority to never allow that, right? And also, to be open and honest in the beginning, I think there's machismo as a male entrepreneur that you're not going to share anything with your spouse. Share it with them. They could have, they should know. Here's what's going on. I just lost a client, right? We did, I overextended by making a bet on an industry that didn't work out. So I think being more sturdy, in who I am, if you will, right? More solid in who I am and being able to share that. Now, listen, I'm also seeking a little bit of help, right? And talking to some people and talking to other entrepreneurs and realizing that I'm not the only one going through pain. And the important thing is to share that with people. So I think that's how I've changed a lot and working on it every day. So I don't have an answer. I'm trying to get better.
For me, life is about continuous improvement. At least that's been my journey. I can't say that I'll speak for anybody else, but for me, I'm continuing to learn and grow every single day. And the man that I am today is a result of going through a hell of a lot of pain, making a lot of mistakes, having to look at the guy in the mirror and get real honest with, what do you care about? What matters to you? Who am I being, right? And making a decision to either step into that or ignore it. I've known a lot of guys that I came up with in the professional circle who haven't ever taken that step. And what has the result of that has been a trail of destruction.
So they have created a tremendous amount of revenue. But the things that I think you and I would probably agree on as being the greatest form of wealth is in those that we love, the relationships that we have. They don't have that. And I'm really grateful that at some point in my life, I was like, you know what? My kids really matter. They are the most important thing. I'm going to protect them and pour into them at all costs. And if the business suffers as a result of that, so be it. And that's what I did. So I'm really just congratulations on, 30 years of marriage, over 30 years of marriage, and raising two kids that are thriving. I think that's a tremendous accomplishment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. My youngest son at this point, he's just turned 24. I've got a 20-year-old stepdaughter, 26-year-old stepdaughter, 25-year-old son. And then I've got a couple stepsons that are in their 30s. And I have great relationships with all of them. And I'm so grateful for that. Right. And I look at that like this is my legacy piece. When I was back working with Joe and Prana Marketing, I had this great vision that I was going to be like this amazing, like legendary marketer. That's what I wanted to create. Right. And I was going to be the one that, wasn't dysfunctional and blah, blah, blah. Like some of the great guys that I followed. I won't mention any names, but I'm sure you know who they are. And, I realized that we're all just human. And as time goes by, it is a continuous choice for me to step into being the best that I can be, to face my quote unquote demons, to deal with my character inadequacies and just the human flaws that I have, and really, to have the hard conversations with myself and others. I love one thing that you said about sharing stuff with your wife. So my first marriage fell apart. Well, actually, it didn't fall apart. It was, a choice by one of us, and it wasn't me to not continue growing. But the woman that I'm married to now, I feel like I found her like my life partner. I didn't really think there was such a thing until I met this woman. But she knew nothing about marketing, right? She is so far opposite from my world, it's not even funny. She also didn't know anything about the addiction issues that Joe and I both struggled with when, earlier in our lives. And like a good girl completely, but she's super smart, right? 3 degrees, was going to be an attorney, poured her life into being a mom and being like a childcare expert. Holy cow. I started, like when we were dating, she was sending me these texts, Nick, and I'd start to cry or laugh, like roll on the floor laughing. And I was like, you're an amazing writer. She's like, oh, no, I'm not. I'm like, no, you are. Like, trust me. I don't want to tell this long story, but the point is, like, as we've been together now 10 years, I've gone to her and shared some of my frustrations with clients or projects or whatever. And she gives me these incredible insights. And I'm like, where did you get that? And she says, it's just common sense.
It's just life, right? It's just life. Of course, I know this, right?
Yeah.
And well, sometimes you do, the emperor has no clothes, right? You just need the person to say, dude, you can't do that. If they don't pay you, don't deliver the work or something of that nature. And,
right.
I think it's so critical. And I think those that you saw, right? You and I both have been around a lot of small business and men and entrepreneurs, and, those that have the great relationship and the great spouse, there's something there. And they may not be involved in the business, but they are there and they're almost like the rock, right? They're the foundation that you build on. And to me, it's the most important thing. I've been blessed, in my neighborhood that I grew up in and now live in. I'm a cliche, right? That I moved back, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun, right? When your kids go to the same high school that you went to, but it was a community of small businessmen, right? And their wives were there running the business, but my guess is they were also part of the kitchen table board of directors, right? Let's talk about this. And my best friend in the world, my best man in my wedding, it was a family that ran the business, and it was a very large business. Well, you'd have the family around the table on Sundays, and you'd eat and you play and you talk, but then you talk through the problems. And I think there is something that's foundational in having that partner and that spouse that you could have enough as men. And I think it takes a lot of security in who we are, to be vulnerable and to share and to say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. And I think it takes a lot of growth. I don't think we're hardwired for that, right? I think we are hardwired that we have to solve all the problems.
Right.
And kudos to you for having that. Great on the 10 years. And, certainly I can't wait to hear 10 more years and how much you guys have grown together and how much everything has had, because your smile is ear to ear as we're talking about her. So for those that are listening right on the podcast,
Right.
not only, do we have great beards, but, he's got a smile from ear to ear talking about his partner. And so am I, right? Thinking about it. That's what brings you joy. Not that you went out and you got another client, not that you added a zero to your net worth. It's, I was a good spouse, right? I raised good children. They want to be around us, right? Hey, my daughter called me yesterday. I haven't talked to you in a couple of days. Oh my God. That was like the best call. Could have been better. It was better than a, $20,000 check that came, right? It was like, oh my God, how you doing? What's going on, honey? Yeah. I'm trying to give you some space. Thanks for calling your old man, So it's just fun, right? And I think that's what gives us joy. And that's what, and we could talk about it more so that those that can learn from the mistakes that we've made, right? Because let's solve a little pain and suffering by them not doing that. So.
Right. And that's a great point, Nick, because I said earlier that the man that I am today is a result of making a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad choices, and a lot of suffering. I mean, there was a period in my life where I was extremely self-centered and selfish. Yeah. I was still battling other types of addictions, and I made horrible choices, choices that were hurtful, that hurt my ex-wife, that hurt me, that hurt other people. The difference for me was that, like, I looked at that and I was like, man, that's not who I want to be. Now, just because I didn't want to be that didn't mean I was automatically able to change. Now, my current wife, she's one of these people that she decides she wants to stop doing something. She just stops. She doesn't understand anybody that struggles with these behavior issues. But, some of that is deep-seated trauma and things that, of course, I learned, from, I think my greatest lessons were looking into the eyes of someone that I loved and realizing that a choice that I made hurt them. And whatever it was that I wanted that made me make that choice was nowhere near as important as the look that I wanted of love and acceptance from them. I'm not sure if I'm making sense here, but like, to me, I have much more excitement when I cook dinner for my wife and she's like, oh my God, this is so good, than I think I do when a client calls me and says, your ad is beating all of our controls. Mm. I mean, I love that. Right. But it's something different inside of me when I'm like, oh yeah, because like, she's my heart, and my kids. I love what you said about your daughter calling you. My stepdaughters are both in college, brilliant girls. One's, is pre-med. She's gonna be a naturopath. She shifted from traditional medicine to naturopath. The other one is going into a special area of education, really challenging. But they come home from college almost every weekend because their mom, they're like thick as thieves.
That's wonderful.
Now, they include me in that, but I mean, they've got a longer history than I do in their family. But when I was a 20-something, I didn't want to be around my dad. Like, that's the last place I wanted to be. It wasn't that I didn't like him, but I just had things that were more important. So the fact that our kids want to call us, the kids want to be around us, I think that's a success. So here's where I was going with that long monologue. You said, let's talk about ways that we can help people develop these things and not make these kinds of mistakes. Is there anything that stands out to you as something that you learned that, you would like to go back and say to 30-year-old Nick?
The list is long, right?
Yeah,
for sure. I'm human, and so I think the first two we just talked about, right? You made a commitment to having a family. That's the most important thing, right? So everything stands in that, and it's okay, right? And you're human and you're going to make mistakes as a young father, there's no instruction manual, right? And as a young spouse, you're going to make mistakes, but just learn and grow and keep on making deposits in the emotional bank accounts, right? Keep on giving love. Leave with that. Realize that problems happen, and don't turn your back or run away or put your head in the sand. Realize that they happen. They happen for you. They happen for your family. You got to solve that. And you solve it as a group, as a community, right? And Joe, you guys were great when my son was struggling, right? And so looking for sources of people to talk to that could help, right? Maybe they don't know, but they could help. That's important. And listen, also realize that everybody goes through it, right? There's stuff that everybody's got going on up here. I think on the business side of things, goes back to how we started maybe a little bit, is you can never take your foot off the gas on the sales and marketing of your business. And I did on one of my businesses, right? And then I thought I was the smartest guy in the world. It was 2006 to 2008 when we launched our agency. I was heavy in home improvement and home services. I couldn't spend the money fast enough, right? It was just flowing in. Well, in 2009 and 2010, I wasn't that bright, right? But I had taken the gas off, right? And so now you got to double down and you got to triple down and that. So never take your foot off. Always put the pressure on selling and growing the business. And one of the things that you and I talked about too is never lose sight of your financials, because that's the pain, right? You will feel that if you lose those. So listen, I made every mistake in the book, but I've learned from them, and I hope to share that with you. So focus on your family, make the emotional bank account, realizing that growing a business is not as important as having a solid family life, right? And just keep on growing your business, keep on selling, keep on marketing, and keep your eye on the financials, right? And so those are mistakes that I've made, full transparency about them. Right. And, had to dig out of some holes. At one time in 2007, 2008, I had a $500,000 line of credit. When the financial crisis happened, I blinked and it was 75,000.
Wow.
Well, back in the day, we were doing a lot of direct mail for our clients and for ourselves. We were writing checks. You had to have cash flow in the business, and you had to cash flow for everything. So, just constantly be looking at that, manage that at all times. I know we all want to take the foot off the brakes and have it easy and live the laptop lifestyle and go travel around the world and do all the fun stuff, but realizing that that's just Instagram, right? You got to run your business every day and you got to focus on it. That's important.
Sure. One of the things I've learned as a father that I wish if I could go back and do differently, there were a lot of times where I stepped in and I solved problems for my sons that really ought to have let them solve on their own. Not always, but there were enough times where I did that. And you said this earlier, men, we're naturally problem solvers. I think we get a lot of value or I can't think of the word, like the good feelings out of being able to solve problems, right? I like to solve problems. I like to solve problems as a marketer, as a copywriter for my clients. And I think one of the toughest things for me with my adult children is when they get into a situation and they're struggling. Like, for some reason, I grew up with this attitude that struggling was a terrible thing and I didn't want my kids to struggle, right? Had a great neighborhood growing up, beautiful house, and copywriting allowed me to provide that lifestyle for them. But then there were times where I came in and I rescued them. And I think it was just for me, the fact that they had a mother that struggled with addiction. There was always chaos around that area. So I was trying to protect them. I was trying to keep a sense of order wherever I could. As an adult, I've had to force myself not to step in, not to rush in and fix their problems.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. Like I'll give you an example. My son lost his job, couldn't pay his rent. I covered it for 1 month. I covered it for 2 months. I was going into the third month and I was like, I don't know if he's really trying hard enough. And he's telling me, Dad, I'm trying. I can't get hired, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? I can't help you anymore. I can't help you. He's like, what am I going to do? I said, I don't know. But I've been there and I raised you right. I believe you'll figure this out. And you know what? He figured it out, right?
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know who grew more from that experience, me or him.
But was it painful to do?
Oh my God. Yeah, it was horrible.
Your heart is like, I can't do it. Those that are listening, we got very animated. I held back from jumping because I agree, right? I've done the same mistakes. I've jumped in, and especially with my son, maybe because he was the firstborn, I don't know, but you'd go to rescue and you're not setting them up with skills for life of how to problem solve, right? They just are, and so as I say, every mistake you make, I got four going back at me, right? And I'm glad that you said that, because I realized that my wife and I were doing a lot of that, right? And, it wasn't helping anybody. And so, but also when you finally say, I can't, you got to figure this out yourself. I love you. I think I raised you right. You have the skills, you have the ability, you have the smarts, figure it out. They do. And they grow, right?
And the funny thing for me is that as I racked my brain trying to think of a solution, like what could my son do to solve this problem that he's not doing? I couldn't come up with something. But when I took myself out of the equation, he came up with something that I didn't even think of.
Yeah.
And after the fact, it was like, well, why wasn't that obvious to me? But the joy that I got, because ultimately what I want as a parent, and I believe that any good parent wants this, is I want to raise kids that are able to take care of themselves and navigate their way through life no matter what.
Yep.
I want to build strong, successful, young men and women of great character who make a difference in this world. And we cannot do that by solving their problems for them, right? So that's just one of the things that stands out to me. A big lesson I've learned.
I think it's a great lesson. And the interesting thing, Tony, we started talking, kind of the state of the world and all that stuff before we got on. And,
yeah.
I don't know about you, but when I interact with my children and their friends, I think they'll solve problems. I'm just worried that we don't screw up the world too much for them to solve the problems that they're going to have to solve, from a geopolitical way, from an economic way, from a communities coming together and working together and all that stuff. And I do have hope, because I do think of parents like you and I and others that are around us and that are listening, is they're trying to raise their children the right way. They're trying to help them. And they realize, listen, I'm going to make some mistakes, right? My parents made mistakes, and we blamed them, but they were just trying to do their best job too. They didn't know. They didn't have the role models, right? If I think about it, right? And so my dad is still around. I talk to him every day, just because I know there will be a day that I don't and I can't, right? And, we're together, Italian family, right? So we're together a lot and around, and probably too much for maybe my wife, but I think she's fine with it. For 30 years, she's stuck around, but it's just part of it. And you realize, hey, it's all based on love, everything that we do, and how do we come together when we have to. So I got a brother, he's getting ready to move to North Carolina, right? And, that's it'd be like the first one that's kind of moved farther away, and isn't in the town. And so it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen with them. But I think it's a great journey for he and his wife. He suffered from mental problems growing up, right? Bipolar. He talks about it. He writes about it as a copywriter. You'd appreciate it. Writes books and articles and comic books about it. And it's part of his therapy. But, listen, everybody's got something, right? And you just try to solve it as a family, and you solve it as support, and you just give them love, and you realize, you can't make the decisions for them. And I agree with that with the kids.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the one thing that I did right and consistently in raising my kids was I let them know they were loved. I showed them they were loved.
Yeah.
And the way that I showed that was I made them a priority. I showed up for their events. I put them first when they needed to be first.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always easy, and it certainly wasn't always fun, but I believe that shifted their confidence level. And because when I look at both of at least my two natural sons, they are really rock stars when it comes to relationships and self-confidence. And that's not who I was growing up. So that component that you have gone back to a number of times, lead with love, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So looking back over your life, is there a moment that you wish you could revisit and change? And if so, why?
We don't have enough time on this podcast, but yes,
I've got hundreds.
Right. I probably got thousands, right? And it's not that I'm trying to one up you. It's just these 1,000 things that I wish I would have done and done better. Growing up in an Italian household, I grew up with loud, right? Loud parents, loud father, loud, right? And you're raising your hand. And so I think I carried that into my family. And there was times where everybody thought I was angry. I was just loud. but I did have a temper, and I wish I would have learned to control that a lot earlier, right? And so I had to work on that, work on it from a mental perspective, work on it from a physical perspective, right? So just exercising helped me being able to control that and that. So I wish that would have been the one that probably had repercussions, right? Just because it's what you saw growing up. And I don't think they didn't know any better. They saw that growing up, and I carried that in. And so I had to work on that. That would be the biggest one that comes to my mind, that if I could go back, put that genie in the bottle, I would have started working that out really, really, really early.
Yeah. I share that one with you. And I don't know how much of that has anything to do with our heritage, because people would say that that's just a stereotype. However, my father came from a family where he had 7 siblings, and we were just loud. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't really realize how that was until I got married, to Donna, and she's got 2 daughters. And the first time I said something to him like, "Hey, Gabby, would you bring that over here for me?" at about that volume.
Yeah.
And her face, and I was like, "What's the matter?" She's like, "Why are you yelling at me?"
Yeah.
Or like, "I was yelling at you?"
Yeah.
I didn't even realize, what was normal volume from my sons and I, not angry volume, is to them was way different. Also, the temper thing.
Yeah.
Now, I know for me that a lot of that comes from the fact that my dad was very physical with me, physical discipline. He yelled at me a lot. I had trauma in my life. For me, whether that's part of, what my natural tendencies would be or not for that temper, or that was part of nurture, a combination of both, I don't know, but I had it. And I started working on it, but it's still something that I have to exercise a tremendous amount of awareness in to make sure that it stays reined in, right? Because I can get angry about the dumbest things. And as I look back on my parenting, there were times when I lost it that I wish I could go back and do differently, right? Now, one thing that I did that my dad didn't do was whenever that happened, I would go back to my boys and I would say, my behavior there was really inappropriate. It was unacceptable. I was demonstrating to you what it's like to be a man who is not being self-controlled. And I don't want you to think that that's okay. Now, you're going to feel angry. You're going to get angry. You're going to make mistakes. But I want you to know that this is not how I want to be. And I'm working on this. And I would apologize and I would take ownership for my actions rather than just fluff it off. So I hope that at some level that made an impact. I don't see those traits in my boys so much, which is a good thing.
Yeah. We learn, right? And I think that's great that you had that. I was thinking about it. I'm like, I think I did that, but I wouldn't put a bet on it that I did it as often as you did, or as well and elegant as you did, or with the frequency, right? So I think sometimes you just flew off the handle and you just let it happen and you let it sit, and it's like this weight that is now taking the family down, and you have to control it.
I think you and I are part of a generation that I judge grew up with, and maybe this is still the same. Men were allowed to feel 2 things. We were allowed to laugh, and we were allowed to be angry.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
That was it. And, I do a lot of men's work. I got into something years ago, called Warrior Circle.
Oh, sure.
And, so I work with men. I lead a men's group now. And part of the framework that I teach is 5 feelings: mad, sad, glad, afraid, ashamed. And then data, judgment, and feelings. And this is the framework. So the mad is I'm blocked. I'm angry because I'm trying to get something in my life and I can't get it to it. The sad is I've lost something. Afraid is this judgment that I'm going to get hurt. Shame is this belief that I'm no good. And glad is I'm aligned, right? And the data is what the camera sees. The judgment is my opinion, my feelings, my opinion and my judgment about those feelings. And the feelings are, what are the 5 things that are coming up for me as a result of what I see and my opinions about? And boy, the guys that I introduced to this work, it's transformational for them. I know it was transformational for me. I started in like 2007 when I first discovered this. And it has helped me to really separate some, the way that I process a lot of things in life. Have you ever heard someone say something like, boy, I feel like crap?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
When you think about that, it's like, what does that mean? Are you talking about like the physical thing that would be excrement? Is that what you feel like? How does that feel? How many different, it's ambiguous, right? But when I start to take a look at what I'm actually feeling and I put some definitions behind it, then there's times when I'm actually sad and it's masquerading as anger because that's what I was allowed to have.
Sure.
Or I'm feeling shame and it's masquerading as anger because I'm not allowed to own that. And so anyone that's listening, the reason I'm even bringing this up is that one of the things I got from what you've been talking about, Nick, is that we become self-aware and we take a look at these things in our life and we learn that they're there and we reach out for help when we need it. Don't be an island, right? If I could go back at some of the toughest times in my life, I think I would have rather just reached out. I was much more comfortable being the helper than being the one asking for help. I was much more comfortable being the one offering advice than saying, man, I'm screwing up over here. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Right. And, somewhere around 40, mid 40s, that started to become something that was just a go-to for me. It wasn't always comfortable, but I would get there, and it makes a big difference. So ask for help.
Ask for help. And I think be in groups, like masterminds, right? I think part of it is support, right? Part of it is just, let's share best practices and ideas, but let's realize that we're not an island unto ourselves. And I think we want to be an island. And as small business owners and entrepreneurs, we tend to think that we have to, and realize that that's just BS that we're telling ourselves, and reach out, right? There's a lot of good sources, and realize that you're not alone. Or if you have a family member that's struggling, realize that there's a lot of good sources and you could help them. And hopefully somebody listen that's struggling realizes that and realizes that we're, just ping us and we'll get you to the right place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's there's not too many topics I haven't broached at some point, some kind of,
that's nothing I haven't seen, right? And, maybe I walked through the fire, or maybe I was carrying somebody through the fire, or I was walking around it. But you've been around this world as many turns as you and I have. You're going to see some stuff. And, you realize, we have a picture in our mind, and that picture, is not fair.
You mentioned reaching out for support. So how do you continue to learn and grow outside of your career, like in your personal life?
I have conversations like this, right? And I think I've learned as much from you, right? That I'm like, wow, there's like 5 good things that I got, right? But there's probably 10, but I only got 5. Because I'm not that smart. You can see the books behind me, right? I'm a voracious reader, Audible, courses. I just think there's so much different things. I try to be a sponge of different things too, where I was one-dimensional of just reading marketing books and sales books and business books. I now take the summer off and just read different things, different topics, right? Because I think that opens up my mind to different things. I've learned to have good conversations with people, especially my spouse, right? Not superficial conversations, but just good conversations. And maybe because the kids are out of the house, we could go deep on some things. Yeah. I read 3 newspapers a day. Digitally, the old days, we'd have print come to the house, right? Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Financial Times. There's certain newsletters that I enjoy still to this day, and I read. So, there's so much ways to get input. The key is to be subjective with the input. I try to stay away from the news on TV for a number of different reasons. It's an echo chamber. It's bad. I get what I need off of the 3 newspapers, right? It gives me a taste for everything from that.
Do you have any real strong male relationships in your life that are fundamental to who you are and how you just navigate the world?
Yeah. So I have my father still, right? I'm still actively engaged, and we talk every day and, talk about life and problems. As I joked about where I said I was a cliche and you said that's phenomenal. I'm still friends with, like 5 to 7 guys that I grew up with. Right. And so we get together once, at least try to once a month for, dinner or drinks or, Cokes and, something. Yeah. And, you don't really get deep, but you're there and you got support, and every now and then somebody will have something. And so we're there. As men, we don't have enough of those, and you could always do more. I'm very close to my wife, right? And my spouse. I'm very close to my brother, right? So he and I talk at least once a week, and, a lot of it is just to check in, and some weeks it's 3 to 4 times. So those are the ones. There are some relationships that I wish I would have kept up with that I didn't. And then life gets in the way, and then you feel hurt. And then when you reach out and they don't respond, you're like, "Well, was it me, or was it we weren't that close?" So, but those are the ones that I kind of go to.
Yeah, that's great. Nick, is there, as we're coming to the end of our time here, is there a personal challenge that you're currently facing in your life? And is it, and how are you approaching it, if so?
Well, there's always personal challenges, right? So, I've been fighting losing the last 10 pounds, right? Forever, right? So physically, how do I get better? How do I get healthier? I am a prostate cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with it a year ago, over a year ago. I had surgery a year ago in August, and, I had the blessing of the best doctor in the world. Did the guy from Meet the Fockers who talks about it, Ben Stiller, right? Did people that talk about it publicly. So I had that, right? And, so there's the rehab for that's still happening. And there's the physical and the mental, if you will. So I'll talk to people about that all the time. I have guys that call me that, have just been diagnosed and they've heard that I had it, and, talk to them about the processes and things that I learned, and even said, "Hey, have your spouse talk to my spouse, or have your partner talk to my partner," which is Vicky, and, she could take it from your perspective. So that's, still processing. Sales performance team has done very well. I've been blessed, right? Knock on wood, but I really want to grow it. I really want to make an impact and scale it. So I am struggling with that, right? So what does that look like? Who do I bring in? How do I bring them in? What do I focus on? It's been me, right? So clients want me. Now, what happens if I have other coaches and other, fractional sales leaders that I put into the business? So what does that dynamic look like? And, always thinking about what's the next wave, right? What's the next wave in the world, and how do I get in front of that wave and catch it and ride it? So those are three struggles that I'm struggling with or working towards, if you will. Struggles, listen, I got them under control. So I don't know if there's struggles. I don't think it's fair. There's people struggling out there with a lot worse. But those are things that I'm going through.
Your cancer experience, that had to be, quite life-altering, having discovered that you went through it.
Yeah, talk about a slap in the face, but, like didn't even see it coming. So no symptoms, anything like that. When you then start peeling back the family envelope, if you will, Tony, I'm sure you have this as well as I. Oh, yeah, your grandfather had it. Oh, your cousin had it, but nobody talked about it. You realize he had it the same age that I got diagnosed in it. And unbeknownst to either of us, were struggling with it. He's older than I am, had the same doctor, right? So, I think the more you could talk about this allows people to realize they're not going through it alone. And one is get yourself checked as a man, but two is, you realize that there's solutions out there and it's not a life sentence, and you get it early enough. And I was blessed. I had the best in the world, I live in Chicago. So it's easy to get to really good, care, and, realize that, it's a journey. When you get in your 50s, right, the body bounces back a lot slower than when you're in your 20s and your 30s to stuff. So, that's, I twisted a knee in the weight room and I'm still in PT getting that, I'm like, God damn, why did I try to do Bavarian split squats, and, I know better, right? You still think you're 30, you see young people. I'm like, I could do this. You're watching it on YouTube. Of course I could do this. And so, it's just little things as the body ages. So.
Right. Yep. Well, we got a lot of those too. Yeah. So I would just want to highlight the thing that you said, because I think it's really important. We grew up in an era where these kinds of things weren't communicated. I try to make sure to communicate the things that nobody talked about when I was growing up to my kids, so that when they get into their 20s and 30s, that they have conversations about things,
Right.
when it comes from, like just male issues, sex issues, thought issues, self-confidence issues, imposter syndrome, like, these kinds of things that nobody ever talked about. I would see my dad, I knew something was going on with him, but I never knew what it was.
Sure.
And it wasn't until years later when I started putting two and two together from my own life, picking out evidence going, oh, I bet that's what was going on for dad. Or, yeah, so communication, like talking about what's really going on, with our family, with those that we love, and being transparent about these things, because then you don't wake up wondering, like, why am I the only one that has ever had this prostate issue? Like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be more apt to actually go get checked had I known, right? So, last question I want to ask you
Sure.
is, it's really about, your impact in the world, the legacy that you want to leave. And so the question is, who do you want to be a hero to? And I'm sure you're already a hero to your family. And that can still be your answer, but is there something that breaks your heart? Is there something that you're so compelled by that you're like, man, this is the impact that I want to make on my life. This is what I want to do before my time is done here.
Well, we talked about it, right? So certainly a hero to the family. But the other thing I'm working on and I'm trying to do more of is be a hero to young people going into the workplace, or maybe being forced in work transition and they don't know what to do. And especially young people trying to break into sales. And so I'm making an effort. Listen, I reached out to my network when my daughter was looking for her first job. And people were unbelievable how wonderful people were. And so I've now made an effort, which is keeping active with my network, but also letting them know if they have a young child graduating from college that thinks they want to get into sales and doesn't know where to go, or struggling getting some traction, or they've lost their job and they're struggling to get traction, to have them talk to me, right? And I spent a lot of time with young people that my daughter went to college with, because they didn't have anybody to teach them how to navigate network and how to look for the job and how to position yourself and all of that. It's a shame that colleges, for that price tag that you and I are both writing checks for, aren't teaching them as well as they should be. But maybe they are, and the kids just aren't, focusing on it. But I think there's a need for that. And I also think that there's a need for some level of mentorship. I was blessed when I got into sales that I was around really, really, really good salespeople, right? They taught you how to dress. They taught you how to interact with clients. They taught you how to position yourself, how to act as a professional, all of that good stuff. And I learned by watching, right? Observing and that type of thing. So that's kind of one is it ties into, the business. So that's good, but it also helps me. Listen, there's bigger things that I should take on in the world, right? Child hunger. There's a lot of other things, but I don't know. I won't know how to tackle those. This is something I could help and I could solve, and it gives me some value. So that's the other thing.
That's amazing. I think that there's really few things that are more valuable than being a mentor to someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think about the people that mentored me. Like, where would my life be had I not had someone to give me some guidance? So, and it is, you make a difference where you can, right?
That's my story. I'm sticking to it, right? Yeah. I mean, there's better people to solve bigger problems in the world. And if I could write a check, I'll write a check, right? Or if I could do something, I'll do something for that. I could solve this, and I know how to help. And so that's what I'm focusing on.
That's great. Nick, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to get a hold of you, if they want to find out about your business, if they need some help, tell me, like, how do folks find you? Where do they need to go?
Real easy. They go to salesperformanceteam.com, right, which is our URL. You can email me, nick@salesperformanceteam.com. I'm real active on LinkedIn, right? So you could go to LinkedIn and just hit me up there. It's Nick or Nicholas Loise, Loise. So those are the easiest ways. I'm on Facebook sporadically, and during the election season, I'm going to be on even less. And I'm on Instagram just for family and fun, right? So I don't, you get DMs there, and I just delete them, right? But hit me up on LinkedIn. We're in that inbox every day. Hit me up on my email. We're in that every day. You go online. We got a bunch of, we talked about Dan, right? We got a lot of good stuff on our website for you, free downloads, audits that you could use. Our book is there. Everything is there. So just go to that and, start the journey and just learn.
That's salesperformanceteam.com, right?
Yep. You betcha.
Yep. All right. I'll have that linked underneath the podcast for those of you that are watching or listening, the links will be there. Nick Loise, grazie, man. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your life and your wisdom and your experience and your time with us today. I so appreciate you being on the show.
Tony, thank you. First off, I do a lot of these podcasts and this was, I think, one of the most enjoyable ones I've ever had. And I've learned so much. And I think your approach is one where you just want to talk to you forever, right? I know we got work to do. So it's Friday, so we got to get some stuff done. But man, oh man, what a great thing you're doing with this podcast, and what a great, you're changing people's lives. And my guess is you don't even know the number of lives that you're changing, but thank you. And thank you for being real. You're a real guy, right? And a lot in this fake world that we live in, especially some of the people that we kind of came around. Thank you for being real.
Wow. What a compliment. Thank you, Nick. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Hero Up Show. Until I see you next time, you are the hero that you can be and that you want to be. So keep going. Keep going. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to Hero Up. I hope today's episode challenged you to step up as a hero in your field and provided you with valuable insights to express your unique voice and message. If you found this episode helpful and motivating, please leave a review and share it with your friends and family. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes and amazing guests. Until next time, find your voice, share your message, live your mission.